Compound interest is a miracle that demands one thing: time. Every year you delay is a year you can never buy back.
Data visualization shows a flat linear income trajectory that violently spikes into an exponential curve of wealth. It represents a recurring statistical anomaly: low-wage workers routinely generating multi-million-dollar portfolios that consistently outscale those of high-earning professionals. Take Grace Groner. Working as a secretary in the mid-20th century, she converted a $180 initial input into a final output of $7.2 million. Or Ronald Reed, a part-time janitor and gas station attendant who pumped gas for minimum wage and ultimately generated an $8 million estate. These outcomes defy our standard assumptions. Neither of these individuals utilized insider trading. They did not possess genius-level analytical skills, and they did not engage in high-risk speculation. This animated diagram breaks down the core compound interest formula. Extreme wealth accumulation is a strict mathematical function of the variable you see highlighted here, t, or time, acting as the exponent in a recursive feedback loop. The primary threat to achieving this calculation is not market volatility or economic recession. The failure point is behavioral friction. Specifically, the human tendency to defer financial decisions. By breaking down the mechanics of dividend reinvestment, we can quantify the exact mathematical penalty of that behavioral friction, mapping the specific six-figure cost of simply delaying a decision. To understand the penalty of delay, we have to deconstruct the mathematical difference between linear saving and compound reinvestment. Saving is a purely additive process. You deposit capital, and the output grows at a static, linear rate. Compounding is a recursive process. The outputs of your investment become new inputs, creating a self-sustaining positive feedback loop. These vintage paper stock certificates represent Grace Groner's initial data set from 1935, a mathematically minute principal input of $180, which purchased exactly 3 shares of Abbott Laboratories. This side-by-side data model compares 2 specific trajectories. The left side, Model A, illustrates linear saving. If Groner had placed that $180 in a standard interest-bearing cash account, it would have grown at a flat, additive rate for 75 years, yielding only a few $1,000s. The right side, Model B, shows the recursive loop Groner actually executed. By automatically reinvesting all corporate dividends, those payouts were immediately converted back into fractional shares. Because she maintained this continuous loop for 75 years, it overrode macro market conditions like recessions and stock splits. The system was forced to compound upon its own growth, violently spiking the curve to $7.2 million. This woman, Ann Scheiber, provides a secondary data set proving this is a reproducible mathematical model rather than a single stock anomaly. Scheiber began her recursive loop incredibly late, at age 51, with an initial input of only $5,000. Yet by maintaining the exact same continuous reinvestment protocol, her portfolio reached $22 million by age 101. Neither investor accumulated capital by accurately predicting market tops. Their wealth is the strict mathematical outcome of allowing a recursive loop enough time to hit its exponential inflection point. If the recursive loop is the engine, we have to examine the relationship between investing skill, the annual rate of return, or R, and the timeline of the investment. We can use Warren Buffett as the empirical ceiling for investing skill and market analysis, yet hidden within his wealth accumulation timeline is a severe statistical anomaly. This bar chart visualizes Buffett's net worth mapped against his age. As you can see, there is a massive visual discrepancy. Roughly 95 to 99% of his total wealth was generated strictly after his 65th birthday. Notice the early starting age of 11 marked on the horizontal axis. While his skill is world-class, that skill required decades of continuous runway to scale into legendary status. The mathematical dynamic is clear. Skill determines the slope of the curve, but time determines the maximum volume under that curve. Everyday investors cannot replicate Buffett's analytical skill. Therefore, the only mathematically viable lever available to generate extreme wealth is maximizing the time horizon. In behavioral economics, there is a concept called choice deferral. It is the human tendency to delay administrative tasks that carry high importance but low immediate urgency. In a corporate setting, this deferral often maps to a highly specific action, failing to sign an HR 401k enrollment form on the first day of a new job. We can measure the exact cost of this behavioral friction by comparing two identical investment models, separated strictly by their start dates. Both datasets share identical baseline variables, a 6% employee contribution rate, a 3% employer match, and a 7% average return. This split-screen graph plots the two trajectories. On the left is the late start dataset. Here, an individual defers the enrollment choice for 19 years, finally starting at age 41. By age 65, total capital inputs are roughly $87,000, and the total output is approximately $310,000. On the right is the early start dataset, representing an individual who executes the decision immediately at age 22. By age 65, total inputs are around $150,000, and the total output reaches $1.3 million. Comparing the two models reveals a stark asymmetry. A marginal increase in invested capital yields a massive $1 million difference in the final output. That extra $1 million is not capital earned through human labor. It is purely the yield of the time variable, 19 extra years of mathematical runway doing the work. We can isolate the most critical segment by zooming in on the first 5 years of the early start curve, from age 22 to 27. Because those initial 5 years of small contributions have 40 years to compound, they alone generate $430,000 of the final total. This demonstrates the mathematical reality of truncating an exponential curve. Deferring investment in your 20s does not simply eliminate early, small contributions. It irreversibly chops off the steepest, highest-yielding end of the curve decades later. This reframes the entire concept of market risk. The largest quantifiable threat to a portfolio is not a sudden crash in asset prices, but an unmade decision today. Telling yourself you will do it later carries a direct, calculable tax of over $400,000 levied against your future net worth. Preventing this mathematical penalty requires specific behavioral optimizations to remove friction from the recursive loop. The first optimization is immediate opt-in. The system must be engaged at T0 to maximize the exponent's value. The second is capturing the employer match in full. This is not a corporate perk. It is a mathematically risk-free 100% initial return on invested capital. The third is automation. Removing the behavioral friction of choice completely ensures the recursive loop operates without interruption. The fourth is broad diversification. Utilizing broad index funds protects the principal from individual corporate failure, negating the need for stock-picking skill entirely. This equation returns us to the absolute core of wealth generation. The market does not reward intellect, and it does not reward attempts to time economic cycles. It strictly rewards patience and early initiation. In an exponential system, the highest possible penalty is the opportunity cost of an unmade decision.